Hello everyone. Today we will complete our explanation to the novel A Tale of Two Cities with the chapter 6, The Marquis. This is a summary of the main actions happened in this chapter. A carriage dashed through the streets of Paris and advanced, leaving men and women screaming. At the corner of a street fountain, the carriage hit a small boy. It was a common thing for the nobles to drive on like that and leave wounded behind. The carriage of the Marquis of Evermont wouldn't have stopped hadn't one of the wheels been damaged. A tall man, who was called Gaspard, had carried the little boy and laid him on the basement of the fountain, and was down in the mud weeping over the dead body of the child. The people closed round at the Marquis with anger in their eyes. The Marquis, more concerned about his horses, looked out at the crowd and inquired about that noise. And the driver told him that a little child was run over by the carriage and was killed. The Marquis said, "It's extraordinary to me that you people cannot take care of yourselves and your children. One or the other of you is forever in the way. How do I know what injury you have done my horses?" He then threw a gold coin to the tall man, the father of the child, who screamed once again. He screamed, "Dead!" The poor father was arrested by Mr. Defarge, who comforted him by saying, "It's better for the poor little plaything to die so than live." The Marquis thought it was a wise remark and threw another coin to the wise man, Defarge. But as he sat back in his seat with a satisfied smile, with the air of a gentleman who had accidentally broken something common and paid for it, the coin came flying back into the carriage. The Marquis, mad with anger, ordered the driver to stop and looked at the people, and said that if he had ever known who threw that coin, he would have him crushed under the wheels of his carriage. The people remained silent, and no eyes were raised, because they knew what such a man could do to them. Mr. Defarge had disappeared, and in his place there was his wife, Madame Defarge. She was looking at the Marquis straight into the eyes. The people of the village were very poor. They were fed on onions, leaves, grass, and whatever the earth yielded. Besides, they paid all sorts of taxes. For example, tax for the landlords, church tax, state tax, and general tax, a matter which made them even poorer. The land was very poor. It gave them only poor beans, peas, and poor vegetables. The village itself was also poor. It had one poor street, one poor tavern, one poor stable yard, one poor fountain, and one poor chapel. While waiting for his horses to be changed, the Marquis asked the road mender why he was gazing at him on the road. The mender of the road told him about a man who was swinging by the chains of horses. The Marquis got so angry and sent some of his men to look for that man, who looked like a spectre, which means a ghost. The Marquis at last came to his chateau, which was surrounded by tall trees. It was a very splendid house, well furnished, and there was a hall full of hunting spears, swords, knives, and rods, which were used for whipping the poor farmers. The Marquis was expecting a visitor from London. The visitor was his nephew, who lived in London under the name of Charles Danay. The Marquis received him coldly. He didn't even shake hands with him. At dinner, a conversation took place between them, and we get to know that Charles was quite different from his uncle. He told his uncle and said, "Sir, we have done wrong and are reaping the fruits of wrong," said Charles to his uncle. Charles referred to the Marquis and his mother on her deathbed, begged him to be merciful to the people and to make up for the wrong both his father and his uncle had done. Charles told his uncle that his property and France were lost to him, and that he would live in England, where he wouldn't feel ashamed of his family name. At night, the Marquis was stabbed by a knife on its handle, a scrap of paper with "Drive him fast to his tomb." This from Jack. And that was the summary of chapter 6. Now, let's come to some important questions about that chapter. Question number 1. Why did Defarge say that it was better for the child to die? Gaspard got mad on seeing his child run under the wheels of Marquis' coach. He ran madly toward the Marquis, but Defarge got hold of him and comforted him, saying that it was better for the child to die, as he died without pain, rather than live to suffer poverty, misery, and neglect. Question number 2. What made the village people poor? The village people were very poor because of the many taxes they had to pay. They paid taxes for the landlord, church tax, local tax, and general tax, which left them with nothing. Question number 4. A quotation. It's better for the poor little child to die so than to live. He died at once without pain. These words were said by Mr. Defarge to Gaspard after the Marquis of Evermont's carriage passed over his child and killed him. He tried to comfort the poor father, saying that it was much better for the child to die at once without pain than live a life full of pain, misery, and poverty. Another quotation. It's extraordinary to me that you people cannot take care of yourselves and your children. One or the other of you is forever in the way. How do I know what injury have you done my horses? These words were said by the Marquis to the people of Saint Antoine after his carriage had passed over a child and killed him. He was so angry and blamed the people for being careless and couldn't take care of themselves or their children. He was more worried about his horses, not the people in the street. Question number 9. Give an example of the poverty of the people at the village. The village was very poor. It had one poor street, one poor fountain, one poor wine shop, one poor stable, and one poor church. The people ate onions, leaves, and grass. The people had to pay taxes for the landlord, church tax, local tax, and general tax, which left them without nothing. Question number 13, and our last question. What were Darnay's plans for the future, and whose wish was it? He planned to leave all the property, the land, the money, back to the poor farmers when everything became his. That was the wish of his dead mother. Thank you for listening to me today, and see you soon, inshallah, in the next video. Thank you.